The four Konig-class battleships were ordered as part of the ongoing German naval arms race. They were the fourth generation of German dreadnought battleships, and they were built in response to the British Orion class that had been ordered in 1909. The Königs represented a development of the earlier Kaiser class, with the primary improvement being a more effective or efficient arrangement of the main battery. The ships had also been intended to use a diesel engine on the center propeller shaft to increase their cruising range, but development of the diesels proved to be more complicated than expected, so all steam turbine power plant was retained. Koenig displaced 25,769 tons as built and 28,600 tons fully loaded, with a length of 175.4 meters or 557 feet 6 inches, a beam of 29.5 meters or 96 feet 9 inches, and a draft of 9.19 meters or 30 feet 2 inches. They were powered by 3 Paterson steam turbines, with steam provided by 3 oil-fired and 12 coal-fired Schultz Thermikov water tube boilers, which developed a total of 74,000 or 42,708 shaft horsepower, and yielded a maximum speed of 21 knots. The ship had a range of 8,000 nautical miles at a cruising speed of 12 knots. Her crew numbered 41 officers and 1,095 enlisted men. She was armed with 10 30.5 centimeter or 12-inch SKL 50 guns ranged in 5 twin gun turrets, 2 super-firing turrets, each fore and aft, and 1 turret amidships between the 2 funnels. Koenig was the first German battleship to mount all her main battery artillery on the centerline. Like the earlier Kaiser-class battleships, Koenig could bring all of her main guns to bear on either side, but the newer vessel enjoyed a wider arc of fire due to the all centerline arrangement. Her secondary armament consisted of 14 15-centimeter 5.9-inch SKL 45 quick-firing guns and 6 8.8-centimeter or 3.5-inch SKL 45 quick-firing guns, all mounted singly in casemates, as was customary for capital ships of the period. She was also armed with 5-centimeter or 50-centimeter 19.7-inch underwater torpedo tubes, 1 in the bow and 2 on each beam. The ship's armament, or armored belt, consisted of corrupt cemented steel that was 35 centimeters or 13.3 inches thick in the central citadel that protected the propulsion machinery spaces and the ammunition magazines, and was reduced to 18 centimeters or 7.1 inches forward and 12 centimeters or 4.7 inches aft. In the central portion of the ship, horizontal protection consisted of a 10 centimeter 3.9-inch deck, which was reduced to 10 centimeters or 1.6 inches in the bow and stern. The main battery turrets had 30 centimeter or 11.8 inches of armor plate on the sides, and 11 centimeters or 4.3 inches on the roofs, while the casemate guns had 15 centimeters or 5.9 inches of armor protection. The sides of the forward conning tower were also 30 centimeters thick. Konig was ordered under the provisional name S and built at the Kaiserlich with dockyards in Wilhelmshaven. Under construction number 33, her keel was laid down in October of 1911, and she was launched on the 1st of March, 1913, by the king's cousin, Albert, Duke of Württemberg. Fitting out work was completed by the 9th of August, 1945, or 1915, excuse me, the day she was commissioned into the High Seas Fleet. Directly after commissioning, Konig conducted sea trials, which were completed by the 23rd of November, 1914. Her crew consisted of 41 officers and 1,095 enlisted men. Afterwards, the ship was attached to the 5th Division of the 3rd Battle Squadron of the German High Seas Fleet, where she would later be joined by her sister ships. On the 9th of December, Konig ran aground in the Wilhelmshaven roadstead. Her sister ship, Grosse Kurfürst, following right behind, rammed her stern and caused some minor damage. Konig was then freed from the bottom and taken back to Wilhelmshaven. Repair work lasted until the 2nd of January, 1915. Konig took part in several fleet sorties in support of Rear Admiral Franz von Hipper's battlecruisers of the 1st Scouting Group. However, due to her grounding outside Wilhelmshaven, the ship missed the first operation of 3 of these battlecruisers on the night of the 15th and the 16th of December, 1914, when they were tasked with bombarding the English coast to lure out a portion of the British Grand Fleet to the waiting German fleet. On the 22nd of January 1915, Konig and the rest of the 3rd Squadron was detached from the fleet to conduct maneuver, gunnery, and torpedo training in the Baltic. They returned to the North Seas on the 11th of February, too late to assist the 1st Scouting Group on the battle at the Battle of Dogger Bank. Konig then took part in several sorties into the North Sea. On the 29th of March, the ship led the fleet out to Churchling. 3 weeks later, on the 17th and the 18th of April, she supported an operation in which the light cruisers of the 2nd Scouting Group laid mines off the Swarty Bank. Another fleet advance occurred on the 22nd of April, again with Konig in the lead. On the 23rd of April, the third battle squadron reported to the Baltic for another round of exercises lasting until the 10th of May. Another mining operation was conducted by the 2nd Scouting Group on the 17th of May, with the battleship again in support. The battleship Konig participated in a fleet advance into the North Sea, which ended without combat from the 29th until the 31st of May. She was then briefly assigned to picket duty in the German defense belt. The ship again ran aground on the 6th of July. Though damage was minimal, the ship supported a mining operation on the 11th and 12th of September off of Texel. Another fleet advance followed on the 23rd and the 24th of October, or the 23rd and the 24th of October. After returning, Konig went into dry dock for maintenance, rejoining the fleet by the 4th of November. The ship was then sent back to sea, or back to the Baltic, for more training on the 5th through the 20th of December. On the return voyage, she was slightly damaged after grounding in the Kaiser Wilhelm Canal during a snowstorm. Konig was in the Baltic on the 17th of January 1916 for further training. Then, on the 24th of January, returned to the North Sea. Two fleet advances followed on the 5th and the 6th of March, and the 21st and the 22nd of April. Konig was available on the 24th of April 1916 to support a raid on the English coast. Again, as support for the German battlecruiser force in the first scouting group. The battlecruisers left the Jade estuary at 10:55, and the rest of the High Seas Fleet followed at 13:40. The battlecruiser Seadots struck a mine while en route to the target and had to withdraw. The other battlecruisers bombarded the town of Wolostow unopposed, but during the approach to Yarmouth, they encountered the British cruisers of the Harwich force. A short artillery duel ensued before the Harwich force withdrew. Reports of the British submarines in the area prompted the retreat of the first scouting group. At that point, Admiral Reinhard Scheer, who had been warned of the sortie of the Grand Fleet from its base at Scapa Flow, also withdrew to safer German waters. Konig then went to the Baltic for another round of exercises, including torpedo drills off of Mecklenburg. Konig was present during the fleet operation that resulted in the Battle of Jutland, which took place on the 31st of May and the 1st of June 1916. The German fleet again sought to draw out and isolate a portion of the Grand Fleet and destroy it before the main British fleet could retaliate. Konig, followed by her sisters Grosser-Kurfürst, Markgraf, and Kronprinz, made up the 5th Division of the 3rd Battle Squadron, and they were the vanguard of the fleet. The 3rd Battle Squadron was the first of 3 battleship units. Directly astern were the Kaiser-class battleships of the 6th Division of the 3rd Battle Squadron. Directly astern of the Kaiser class were ships were the Holgen and Nassau classes of the 1st Battle Squadron. In the rearguard was the obsolete Dutchland class pre-dreadnoughts of the 2nd Battle Squadron. Shortly before 1600 hours CET, the battlecruisers of the 1st Scouting Group encountered the British 1st Battlecruiser Squadron under the command of David Beatty. The opposing ships began an artillery duel that saw the destruction of the Indefiable. Shortly after 1700 hours, and Queen Mary less than half an hour later. By this time, the German battlecruisers were steaming south to draw the British ships towards the main body of the High Seas Fleet. At 1730, Konig's crew spotted both the 1st Scouting Group and the 1st Battlecruiser Squadron approaching. The German battlecruisers were steaming to starboard, while the British ships steamed to port. At 1745, Scheer ordered a 2-point turn to port to bring his ships closer to the British battlecruisers, and a minute later, at 1746, the order to open fire was given. Konig, Grosser-Kurfürst, and the Markgraf were the first to reach effective gunnery range. They engaged the battlecruisers Lion, Princess Royal, and the Tiger, respectively, at a range of 21,000 yards. Konig's first levels fell short of her target, and so she shifted her fire to the nearer Tiger. Simultaneously, Konig and her sisters began firing on the destroyers Nestor and Nector with their secondary battery. The 2 destroyers closed in on the German line, and after having endured a hail of gunfire, maneuvered into a good firing position. Each ship launched 2 torpedoes apiece at Konig and Grosser-Kurfürst, although all 4 weapons missed. In return, a secondary battery shell from one of the battleships hit Nestor and wrecked their engine room. The ship, along with the destroyer Nomad, was crippled and lying direct in the path of the advancing German line. Both the destroyers were sunk, and German torpedo boats stopped to pick up survivors. At around 1800 hours, Konig and her 3 sister ships shifted their fire to the approaching Queen Elizabeth-class battleships of the 5th Battle Squadron. Konig initially engaged a Barham until the ship was out of range, then shifted to the Valiant. However, the faster British battleships were able to move out of effective gunnery range quickly. Shortly after 1900 hours, the German cruiser Wispin had become disabled by a shell from the British battlecruiser Invincible. Rear Admiral Paul Beckelk in Konig attempted to maneuver his 4 ships to cover the stricken cruiser. Simultaneously, the British 3rd and 4th Light Cruiser Squadrons began a torpedo attack on the German line. While advancing to torpedo range, they smothered Wispin with fire from the American guns, and Konig and her sisters fired heavily on the British cruisers, but even sustained fire from the battleship's main guns failed to drive off the British cruisers. In the ensuing melee, the British armored cruiser defense was struck by several heavy-caliber shells from the German dreadnoughts. One salvo penetrated the ship's ammunition magazine, and a massive explosion destroyed the heavy cruiser, or destroyed the armored cruiser. Shortly after 1920, Konig again entered gunnery range of the battleship Warship and opened fire on her target. She was joined by the dreadnought Frederick de Grossa, Osterfriedland, Helgoland, and Thurgen. However, Konig rapidly lost sight of Warship as she had been in the process of turning east and northeast. Nearly simultaneously, British light cruisers and destroyers attempted to make a torpedo attack against the leading ships of the German line, including Konig. Shortly thereafter, the main British line came into range of the German fleet. At 1930, the British battleships opened fire on both the German battlecruiser force and the Konig-class battleships. Konig came under especially heavy fire during this period, and in the span of 5 minutes, the battleship HMS Iron Duke fired 9 salvos at the battleship Konig from a range of 12,000 yards. However, only 1 shell hit the ship. The 13.5-inch shell struck the forward conning tower, but instead of penetrating, the shell ricocheted off and detonated some 50 yards past the ship. Rear Admiral Beckerk was injured, though he remained in command of the ship. The ship was then obscured by smoke that granted a temporary reprieve. By 2000 hours, the German line was ordered to turn westward to disengage from the British fleet. Konig, at the head, completed her turn, and then reduced speed to allow the vessels behind her to return to formation. Shortly thereafter, 4 British light cruisers resumed the attacks on the crippled Wispin. The leading German battleships, including Konig, opened fire on the cruisers in an attempt to drive them off. The pursuing British battleships had by this time turned further south and nearly managed to cross the T of the German line. To rectify the situation, Admiral Scheer ordered a 16-point turn south and sent Hipper's battlecruisers on a charge towards the British fleet. During the turn, Konig was struck by a 13.5-inch shell from the Iron Duke. The shell hit the ship just after the rearmost gun turret. Konig suffered significant structural damage, and several rooms were filled with smoke. During the turn to starboard, Vice Admiral Shipdement, the commander of the 1st Battle Squadron, decided to turn his ships immediately instead of following the leading ships in succession. This caused a great deal of confusion and nearly resulted in several collisions. As a result, many of the German battleships were forced to drastically reduce speed, which put the entire fleet in great danger. In an attempt to mitigate the predicament, Konig turned to port and laid a smokescreen between the German and British lines. During the battle, Konig suffered significant damage. A heavy shell penetrated the main armored deck toward the bow. Another shell hit the armored bulkhead at the corner and shoved it in back 5 feet, and breaking off a large piece from the armor plate in the process. Shell splinters from another hit penetrated several of the casemates that held the 15-centimeter secondary guns, 2 of which were disabled. The ammunition stores for these 2 guns were set on fire, and the magazines had to be flooded to prevent an explosion. The ship, nevertheless, remained combat effective, as her primary battery remained in operation, as did most of her secondary guns. Konig also steamed at close to her maximum speed. Another area of the ship had to be counter-flooded to maintain stability. 1,600 tons of water entered the ship, either as a result of battle damage or counter-flooding efforts. The flooding rendered the battleship sufficiently low in the water to prevent the ship from being able to cross the Armen Bank until 09:30 on the 1st of June. Konig was taken to Kiel for initial repairs, as that was the only location that had a floating dry dock large enough to fit the warship. Repairs were conducted there from the 4th to the 18th of June, at which point the ship was transferred to the Wolfsgate shipyard. Konig was again ready to join the fleet by the 21st of July. In the course of the battle, she suffered 45 men killed and 27 wounded, the highest tally for any surviving battleship in the German fleet. Following the completion of repairs, Konig was again detached to the Baltic for training. From the end of July until early August, Konig was sent to the North Sea on the 5th of August. A major fleet sortie occurred on the 18th and 20th through the 20th of August, with Konig again in the lead. The first scouting group was to bombard the coastal town of Sutherland in an attempt to draw out and destroy Betty's battlecruisers. However, as Von der Tann and Mokedi were the only battlecruisers in fighting condition, the new battleship Bayern and 2 of Konig's sisters, Markgraf and Grosse Kurfürst, were temporarily assigned to the first scouting group. Admiral Scheer and the rest of the High Seas Fleet would travel behind, providing cover. The British were aware of the German plans and sorted the Grand Fleet to meet them, leading to the inconclusive action of the 19th of August, 1916. By 1435, Scheer, who had been warned of the Grand Fleet's approach and unwilling to engage the whole of the Grand Fleet just 11 weeks after the decisive close call at Jutland, turned his forces around and retreated to German ports. Konig remained in port until the 21st of October, when the ship was again sent to the Baltic for training. The ship returned to the fleet on the 3rd of November. Konig and the rest of the 3rd Squadron then steamed out to Horns Reef on the 5th and the 6th of November. Konig was then assigned various tasks, including guard duty in the German Bight and convoy escort in the Baltic. In 1917, it saw several training missions in the Baltic during the 22nd of February through the 4th of March, and the 14th through the 22nd of March, and the 17th of May through the 9th of June. Konig then went to Wilhelmshaven for maintenance on the 16th of June. The installation of a new heavy foremast and other work lasted until the 21st of July. On the 10th of September, Konig again went into the Baltic for training maneuvers. In early September of 1917, following the German conquest of the Russian port of Riga, the German Navy decided to eliminate the Russian naval forces that still held the Gulf of Riga. The Navy High Command planned an operation to seize the Baltic island of Oso, and specifically the Russian gun batteries of the shore of the Shrouded Peninsula. On the 8th of September, the order was issued for a joint operation with the Army to capture Oso and Moon Islands, and the primary naval component was to comprise the flagship Multi, along with the 3rd Battle Squadron of the High Seas Fleet. The 5th Division included the 4 Konig-class battleships and was by this time augmented with the new battleship Bayern. The 6th Division consisted of the 5 Kaiser-class battleships, along with 9 light cruisers, 3 torpedo boat flotillas, and dozens of mine warfare ships. The entire force numbered some 300 ships, supported by over 100 aircraft and 6 Zeppelins. The invasion force amounted to approximately 24,600 officers and enlisted men. Opposing the Germans were the old Russian pre-dreadnoughts Salva, Tetrich, the armored cruisers Bayon, Admiral Makarov, and Diana, 26 destroyers, and several torpedo boats and gunboats. The garrison on Oso numbered some 14,000 men. Konig departed Kiel on the 23rd of September for Portuguese week, where the ship remained until the 10th of October. The operation began on the 12th of October at 0300 hours. Konig anchored off Oso in Tauga Bay and disembarked sailors by 5:50. Konig opened fire on Russian coastal battery emplacements, joined by Mulkit, Bayern, and the other 3 Konig-class battleships. Simultaneously, the Kaiser-class engaged the secondaries on the Shrouded Peninsula, and the objective was to secure the channel between Moon and Dagon Islands, which would block the only escape route for the Russian ships in the Gulf. Both Grosser-Kurfürst and the Bayern struck mines while maneuvering into their bombardment positions. With minimal damage to the former, Bayern was severely wounded and had to withdraw from Kiel for repairs. At 17:30, Konig departed to the area to refuel. She returned to the Izerba Strait on the 15th of October. On the 16th of October, it was decided to detach a portion of the invasion flotilla to clear the Russian naval forces in Moon Sound. These included the 2 Russian pre-dreadnoughts. To this end, Konig and Kronprinz, along with the cruisers Strasbourg and Kolberg, and a number of smaller vessels were sent to engage the Russian battleships, leading to the Battle of Moon Sound. They arrived in the morning of the 17th of October, but a deep Russian minefield thwarted their progress. The Germans were surprised to discover that the 30.5 centimeter guns of the Russian battleships outranged their own 30.5 centimeter guns. The Russian ships managed to keep the distance wide enough to prevent the German battleships from being able to return fire, while still firing effectively on the German ships, and the Germans had to take several evasive maneuvers to avoid the Russian shells. However, by 1000 hours, the minesweepers had cleared a path through the minefield, and Konig and Kronprinz dashed into the bay. By 1013, Konig was in range of Slava and quickly opened fire. Meanwhile, Kronprinz fired on both Slava and the cruiser Bayan. The Russian vessels were hit dozens of times until 10:30. The Russian naval commander, Admiral Bakerberg, ordered their withdrawal. Konig had hit Slava 7 times. The damage inflicted prevented her from escaping to the north. Instead, she was scuttled and her crew was evacuated on a destroyer. In the course of the engagement, Konig struck the cruiser Bayan once. Following the engagement, Konig fired on shore batteries on Wooey and Warder. On the 20th of October, Konig was towed by minesweepers into the roadstead. Konig transferred sailors to the island of Skrupnert, or Shikadem, which was then occupied. By that time, the fighting on the island was whittling down. Moon, also, and Dago were in German possession. The previous day, the Admiral Stab had ordered the cessation of naval actions and the return of the dreadnoughts to the high seas fleet as soon as possible. On the return voyage, Konig struck bottom in a heavy swell. The ship was repaired in keel, and the work lasted until the 17th of November. Following Konig's return from the Baltic, the ship was tasked with guard duties in the North Sea, with providing support for minesweepers. Konig returned to the Baltic on the 22nd of December for further training, which lasted until the 8th of January, 1918. Another round of exercises was conducted from the 23rd of February to the 11th of March. On the 20th of April, Konig steamed to assist a German patrol that was engaged in British forces. The ship was part of the force that steamed to Norway to intercept a heavily escorted British convoy on the 23rd and through the 25th of April, though the operation was cancelled when the battlecruiser Motkeith suffered mechanical damage. Konig was briefly grounded in the northern harbor of the island of Helgoland on the 30th of May. 2 months later, on the 31st of July, Konig and the rest of the 3rd Squadron covered a minesweeping unit in the North Sea. The ship then went to the Baltic for training on the 17th through the 18th of August, after which Konig returned to the North Sea. Konig conducted her last exercise in the Baltic starting on the 28th of September. The maneuvers lasted until the 1st of October. Konig was to have taken part in the final fleet action days before the armistice, an operation which envisioned the bulk of the high seas fleet sorting from the base in Wilhelmshaven to engage the British Grand Fleet to retain a better bargaining position for Germany. Admiral Hipper and Scheer intended to inflict as much damage as possible on the British Navy, whatever the cost of the fleet. On the 29th of October, 1918, the order was given to depart from Wilhelmshaven to consolidate the fleet in the Jade roadstead, with the intention of departing the following morning. However, starting on the night of the 29th of October, sailors on the Turgent mutinied. The unrest spread to other battleships, including Konig. The operation was ultimately cancelled in an attempt to suppress the mutiny. Admiral Scheer ordered the fleet to be dispersed. Konig and the rest of the 3rd Squadron were sent to Kiel. During the subsequent mutiny, Konig's captain was wounded 3 times, and both her first officer and adjutant were killed. Following the catapultation of Germany, in November of 1918. Most of the High Seas Fleet, under the command of Rear Admiral Ludwig von Reuter, were interned in the British naval base at Scapa Flow. Prior to the capture of the German fleet, Admiral Adolf von Trotha made clear to von Reuter that he could not allow the Allies to seize the ships. Under any conditions, the fleet rendezvoused with the British light cruiser Carafe, which led the ships to the Allied fleet that was to escort the Germans to Scapa Flow. The massive flotilla consisted of some 370 British, American, and French warships. Once the ships were interned, their guns were disabled through the removal of their breech blocks. The fleet remained in captivity during the negotiations that ultimately produced the Versailles Treaty. Von Reuter believed that the British intended to seize the German ships on the 21st of June, which was the deadline for Germany to have signed the peace treaty. Unaware the deadline that had been extended to the 23rd, Reuter ordered the ships to be sunk. In the morning of the 21st of June, the British fleet left Scapa Flow to conduct training maneuvers, and at 11:20, Reuter transmitted the order to his ships. Konig sank at 1400 hours. Their ship was never raised for scrapping, unlike most of the other capital ships that were scuttled. The rights to future salvage operations on the wreck were sold to Britain in 1962. The wrecks of the Konig and the battleship Markgraf and the Kronet Prince Wilhelm were designated maritime scheduled ancient monuments on the 23rd of May 2001. The ship is now a popular dive site in Scapa Flow, lying at a depth of 40 meters or 130 feet on a sandy shore to the east of Cava. She turned over as she sank, and the hull faces upward at about 20 meters or 66 feet down. There were several dynamite holes in the superstructure where the salvagers had gained access to and obtain non-ferrous materials or metals. In 2017, maritime archaeologists from the Orkney Research Center for Archaeology conducted extensive surveys of Konig and 9 other wrecks in the area, including six other German and 3 British warships. The archaeologists mapped the wrecks with sonar, examined them with remotely operated underwater vehicles, as part of an effort to determine how the wrecks are deteriorating. The wreck at some point came into the ownership of the firm at Scapa Flow Salvage, which sold the rights to the vessel to Tommy Clark, a diving constructor, in 1981. Clark listed the wreck for sale on eBay with a buy-it-now price of €250,000, with the auction lasting until the 28th of June 2018. In 2019, 3 other wrecks, those of Clone Prince William, Markgraf, and the light cruiser Karlsruhe, all also owned by Clark, were also placed for sale. The wrecks of Konig and her 2 sisters ultimately sold for $25,500 apiece to a company from the Middle East, while Karlsruhe sold to a private buyer for €8,500. And with that being said, this concludes today's video. If you guys did enjoy today's video, please do go hit that like button and subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. Please share this with a friend or family member who would be interested in watching this. And please comment down below if you guys have any questions, concerns, or requests for a video or on a video. And with that being said, I thank everybody for tuning in, and I shall see you all in the next video. Peace out.